Hi everybody, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be giving overalls to even more classic killers. More specifically, 3 of the most classic horror movies that jump-started our genre. If you don't know what an overall is, basically we're going to be killers an overall or a number value on how good they are at that selected 5 categories. The 5 categories of course are going to be stealth, mode of killing or how they kill their victims, their personality / background, and looks. In today's episode we're going to be going over Dracula, Frankenstein, and the Wolfman. Due to these being the most popular classic horror movies, I'm going to keep the backgrounds moderately short. Starting first, we have Dracula.
I am Dracula.
Dracula has been in multiple books, movies, and spin-offs. The original Dracula came out all the way back in 1931, and that's the movie we're going to be dissecting to give us his overall. First, we're going to be going over stealth. Obviously, I think we all know Dracula's very stealthy. He can change into a bat, and in some of the original movies, he could even turn into a werewolf. He always seems to be sneaking up on people to chat, as well as constantly lurking in the dark for his next victim. For stealth, Dracula gets a very solid 92. Next up, of course, is going to be mode of killing. Nowadays, a bunch of horror movies constantly have killers / monsters biting and sucking their victim's blood, but Dracula was the OG original at sucking blood and chewing their victim's neck out. The original Dracula was based on Vlad the Impaler, who famously ate his victims. For mode of killing, just for how classic and uncommon it was for back in the day, he's getting a pretty good 90 rating for this one. Next is the background / personality. For Dracula, I gave him a solid 83, simply because Dracula's backstory is never fully explained in any of the original books, but his personality is enough to bring it up to an 83. He always seems to be slick in how he enters and exits scenes, and I think that's something that most monsters and killers do not have. For weakness, I gave Dracula an 82. His weaknesses are pretty uncommon, but I feel like he has just a few too many. For example, of course the sun, garlic, crosses, and during the day Dracula enters a death-like sleep where you can move him, stab him, literally anything. Very much a death-like state, so I added that as a weakness. For looks, just like most classic killers, I had to go high. Especially for Dracula, I gave him a 92. He's always so cleaned up, no 5 o'clock shadow or anything, and with the sick looking suit he always got on, he's always looking fresh, what can I say? With adding all the results up, Count Dracula is a pretty solid 88, which is very far from the top. But wait till the end for a breakdown of our top killers. Next up, Frankenstein. For stealth, there isn't a whole lot of evidence showing that he's super stealthy, other than when he randomly hides for a long period of time. For some reason, people aren't able to find this crazy big dude when crazy murders start happening around the village. For stealth, I had to give Frank a little low but respectable 83. Like I said, there just wasn't enough supporting evidence, really to juice up his stats. Now, Frankenstein does have a more simple way of ending his victims. Now, I did do a whole lot of fact checking, and I couldn't really find exactly how Frankenstein ends his victims, other than just crushing their heads and violently strangling them. Even though this is a simple and more barbaric way of killing people, I still gave him an 85. The only reason for this is just because the idea of a big sewed up man strangling you and crushing you is absolutely horrifying, and none of us want to see that. For his personality, I gave him a super impressive 96. I think that we all know his backstory, so I'll keep it brief. So this doctor named Frankenstein gets a bunch of dead bodies and sews them up together and electrifies them, and then there's a monster. And we all know what happens next. And then he's always really nice to, little kids and stuff, so I had to give the man a pretty good high score, as in a 96. And for weakness, I gave Frank an 88. His main weakness is fire, which yes is a pretty common way to die in others. But with being one of the earliest, most popular monsters, it has perks, and that he was one of the first monsters' weakness that was fire. So yeah, leave me alone comments. And finally looks, what can I say? Have you seen this man? Not only is he super cool looking, but he's an all-time icon, which means company sells millions of masks, costumes every year, but also we're talking constantly about references in new movies and shows, so yes, I gave him a 98, and yes, I think that was the right choice. With all the numbers being thrown into a calculator, Mr. Big Time Frank gets a whopping 89, which I believe is pretty fair for being a monster character. And finally, we get to talk about the Wolfman. The Wolfman originally hit theaters in 1941, only a decade after the premiere of Dracula, arguably the last good monster movie coming from the original Universal monsters. It is always seen hiding in woods or bushes and being able to run really quickly while remaining undetected. For those reasons alone, I give the Wolfman a 92 for his stealth category, which I think everybody can agree with me on that. For mode of killing, the Wolfman does kind of the same thing as Dracula, as in he bites the throat, except he usually eats them after, the throats at least. The Wolfman also uses his big claws to scratch his victims and claw them to death. For those reasons, I give Wolfman respectable 84 because it's not something we haven't seen, but once again, with him being one of the earliest monsters, he does have some perks headed to him. We never truly find out the full backstory of the Wolfman, but in the original 1941 film, the lead character gets bit by a werewolf and it turns out to be a gypsy. Every full moon, he's kind of stuck as a werewolf, and that's all we really know to the extent. We don't know how the gypsy dude, I'm assuming he got bit too, but we don't really know what the original werewolf, where he came from. And for that reason, I gave him a solid 88. Weakness, I think everybody knows that silver is his main weakness. A silver bullet usually does the trick. That's the only way he dies in most movies, if not all the movies. And for being in the 40s, I think that's a pretty good and creative weakness to give a monster. So for weakness, I easily had to give the Wolfman a 94. In the 1941 Wolfman, a man by the name of Jack Pierce did the makeup for the Wolfman. And if you ask me, he did a pretty good damn job. He also did the awesome job with the famous killer that we already talked about, Frankenstein. No wonder why it looks so good for its time. Plus, I love that he keeps his human clothes on while he turns and goes on like little adventures and everything. So for looks, I had to give the Wolfman a 97 because I do really like him. With all those numbers being calculated, that gives the Wolfman a crazy 91, which, if you've seen our previous episodes, you know that means the Wolfman is officially tied for first place for best killer with none other than Mr. Freddy Krueger, the dude we just dissed. Freddy has sat on the top alone for a very, very long time, but now he finally has a new friend, or enemy, the Wolfman. Alrighty, thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please make sure to stab that like button and hit that subscribe button. Until next time, watch your back.